Good morning, everyone. Welcome again to another CREST webinar. My name is Bill Giannone, co-founder of the CREST Network, and I'm so glad to be with you this morning to discuss something that's very near and dear to my heart. It's really more about what not to do than what to do, but I really want to be sounding the clarion call for caution when it comes to something that most of us do every day. Today, the topic is going to be, I read it on Facebook, 3 internet myths that are killing your restoration business. Now, if you are a person who has been following the CREST Network for some time, you know that Dick and I talk about this quite a bit. We are constantly talking about things that happen on Facebook. There's very, very many Facebook groups that talk about restoration, and you know those names. I'm not going to get into anything specific or pick on anybody specific, but you know who we're talking about here. There's a lot of internet groups out there on Facebook, and we go there every day looking for advice, maybe looking for some information. I know dozens of our CREST clients over the years have gone on there to post a question, and it's an innocent question looking for some advice and information that they hopefully are going to get from people who are more experienced in the business, and all that's great. The problem is that much, if not most of that information you're going to get is very dangerous to your business. I'm going to start in a spot where normally we know it's not true, but I'm going to start with the premise that everybody on there who's giving you responses or posting information, that their intentions are pure. I know that's not the case, and you probably are smart enough to understand it's not the case. A lot of people on there are looking to make themselves look good. A lot of people on there are looking to sell services, or they're trying to brag and be a blowhard. Let's assume that their intentions are true, though. The information that they're giving you, they are not coming from people who are incredibly successful business owners or managers. Most of the people on there spend most of their day on the websites trying to make a name for themselves. So if they're a very successful business owner, think about yourself. Think about how hard you're working in your business and how you probably don't have 3, 4, 5 hours a day to spend trolling Facebook looking for posts to respond to all day. You probably might have 30 minutes. Well, if you go and look at the frequency of a lot of these guys who are posting, there's no way they're doing it in 30 minutes. They're doing it in 4 or 5 hours. So how successful could they possibly be? They're not the most successful guys. They're definitely just the loudest guys or the most frequent posters. So you've got to be really careful for that. The other thing you have to realize is that the information that they're giving you, not only is it not good, it's actually killing your business. It's doing the exact opposite of what you intend for your business to do when you're going on there. You're going on with the best of intentions, asking an honest question, looking for really good feedback so you can make an informed decision. Notice what I just said there. I said the word informed decision. I'm afraid that if you go on these blog sites and you go on these restoration pages on Facebook, you're not getting informed comments. You're not getting good quality information that you can process. You're getting information that's killing your business. You're being told the exact opposite in most cases of what you should do. I know. How do I know? Why am I the person who gets to say this? Aren't I just another blowhard on the internet? Well, that may be true, and you can choose to believe that if you'd like, but I think there are two things that separate me from most of the people on these sites. First and foremost, after 25 years on Wall Street, I have spent the last 15 years of my professional career coaching restoration businesses. I got into this industry in 2009 when I left Wall Street, and my very first coaching client was a restoration company that did large loss, and they rented equipment. So I've worked with them. I've worked with hundreds of restoration companies, helping them with invoicing and collections. I've worked with scores of restoration companies, being their personal coach, helping them out with all of their processes and helping them out with their administrative side of the business. So I've seen it firsthand. I've literally been on hundreds of jobs for our clients over the years, walking them through the jobs, helping them to understand how those jobs should function, how they should be able to go on there, do their work, and make money. So I am an in the field, hands-on restoration coach. The other thing that differentiates me is, in addition to doing all that for the last 10 years, I've actually been the CEO of a restoration company. I'm actually coming to you from our offices here in Atlanta. If you happen to hear noise in the background, I don't know if the mic is picking it up, but I'm actually working at a restoration company where my office is, where I share an office there, both with the company I work with, and they allow me very generously to do my CREST coaching from this office as well. But for the last 10 years, I have been involved with this company. In that time, when I got here, we were doing about 1.5 million a year. 10 years later, our revenue this year is going to hit $25 million. So that doesn't mean anything in and of itself, but what it does mean is that I get to practice what I preach. And if I've got an opinion, my opinion is based on the successful do's and don'ts of what we've done over the last 10 years in running my business, and hopefully the scores of other CREST clients that Dick and I have helped over the last 5 years. That's where I come from. So that's how I think I know the difference between pretenders and contenders, so to speak. So let's talk about the Facebook foolishness, as I call it. Here are the 3 most popular myths that Facebook pages are posting. I'm going to go one by one. There's probably 30 or 40, and I could be on here all day giving a full day webinar on it. But we're going to focus on the 3 most important ones that I think are really the most dangerous. Let's start off with the number 1 spot that most of these pages concentrate on, and that I think they're steering you in the wrong direction. Number 1, you can't make money using Xactimate. Now, this might not be the exact phrase. They're going to use other phrases like, you have to raise your rates to meet your costs, or the insurance companies control the program, right? Why are they saying this? Well, the main reason they're saying this is because we all know that if we're doing residential mitigation, by and large, the insurance companies would prefer that we create our invoices using Xactimate. If we're talking about quote unquote industry standards, which a lot of us like to use when we're referring to IRCRC or OSHA, things like that, then industry standard for invoicing would be considered Xactimate. The people using the program feel like the statements that are on this page accurately reflect the reality of what goes on in the market. I'm here to tell you that they don't. I know that a lot of you don't want to hear this, and a lot of this goes against a lot of the quote-unquote experts, including some people that I respect in this industry. Yes, it's true that you are allowed to change your prices, but you don't have to raise your rates in order to make money. You can make money using Xactimate. And no, the insurance companies do not control the program. I'm going to get into that in a little more detail right now while we explode the Xactimate myth. For those who truly understand the program, there are 3 main factors that go into how an Xactimate line is calculated and how that means our invoice gets calculated. So let's look at each one of them individually to figure out if we can, in fact, make money. Now, I'm going to tell you things that none of the other experts you've read about even understand. Forget about have the ability to tell you. Number 1, let's talk about the equipment rates. I happen to think the rates that we are allowed to charge on Xactimate for equipment are extremely fair. What is fair? What constitutes fair? Well, let's factor in, what is your cost for having the equipment? You have a loss of capital cost because you had to spend the money up front to buy the equipment. You have a rental cost for your facility because you have to store the equipment. And then you have other ancillary costs for the equipment, like a maintenance cost, because you have to absolutely maintain the equipment from time to time. There are certain things that you can't charge for an Xactimate, like the general maintenance. If a part goes down, that's not an Xactimate line item you could charge to a job. But cleaning the equipment is, setting it up and taking it down is, And the filters that go into certain pieces of equipment can be charged for as well. So those are different things. Those last two things I mentioned, the cleaning of the equipment and the filter changes, are things that a lot of people don't choose to bill for. Here where I am in Atlanta, we bill for all of that because those are legitimate direct costs. And when we're talking about Xactimate, we're talking about being able to bill to the job any direct costs associated with doing that job. If equipment's on a job, cleaning the equipment when it comes off that job is a direct cost. You wouldn't have to clean the equipment if it wasn't on the job. Changing the filters is a direct cost to the job because if the equipment was not running, you wouldn't have to change the filters. Obviously, general maintenance is not, so that's built into why we get to charge what we charge. So what did I say? Facility costs, so your rental and storage, your maintenance costs. I also mentioned earlier your cost of money because you have loss of capital that you'd be able to use in other parts of your business. Those are all factors that go into what we're allowed to charge for. Now, let's admit this. If you're willing to admit to me that Home Depot or Lowe's or an equipment provider like a Sunbelt has similar expenses that you do, they have to store the equipment, they've already purchased the equipment, and then they're going to rent it to you or sell it to you. But let's just say the rental part of it, they're going to rent it to you on a daily basis. So they have the same incurred costs that you do, the same what I would call non-direct costs or indirect costs. Well, go look at the rental rates that they're charging for the same pieces of equipment that you get to charge. I promise you, in your neighborhood, Home Depot and Lowe's are renting out air movers and dehumidifiers for a lower amount than you are. I know for a fact that Sunbelt and the other national rental companies are renting out equipment for a much, much lower rate when you factor in the other fact that they charge weekly rates of 3 days of equipment. In most cases, when we're on a job less than a week, we're not charging a 3-day max. If you are, you're either in a program or you're making another fatal mistake by listening to idiots who are telling you that you can't get away with charging for more than 3 days. So that's a major, major factor. I think the equipment rates that we get in Xactimate are extremely fair and extremely profitable for us. Let's talk about labor rates. That's the second thing that's in a line item. Now, the equipment rates are usually just in for the drying equipment. There are certain pieces of equipment that will go into the other, what I call unit cost line items, the things like removing drywall and things like that. There'll be little costs associated with that. Excuse me. But for things like HEPA vacuuming, there'll be the vacuum itself that are built into that. You still get a fair rate for the use of that equipment on a daily basis. The second thing that's factored in is a labor rate, and that's the hourly rate that you're getting for your people. Now, you go on most of these Facebook pages and you're going to see we don't get enough for our people. By the time you factor in the entire quote unquote burden, and these people don't even understand what burden is, we don't get enough for our labor rates. We have to change and we have to raise our labor rates. Okay, I'm going to explode this myth right now. Your burdened labor rate in just about every state, so I'm going to say just about because the vast majority of states, this is true. Your burdened labor rate, which means everything it's costing you to have your employee above and beyond the hourly wage, is no more than 50% more than the hourly wage. Now, in some states, like California, Washington State, there are very high additional burden rates. So the burden on the California employee might be 75% more than the labor rate. But the burden rate for most people, fully burdened, is about 50% higher. So if you've got an employee making $20 an hour, put 50% additional onto that, which would be an additional $10, your entire costs that it's costing you for that employee is $30. If you have an employee that's costing you $25 an hour, 50% of that would be $12.50. Add that on, you're at $37.50. Think about what you're paying your people right now, and is it in the $20 to $25 range? Chances are, if you're a successful company in a major market, that's probably the going rate. Yes, it's a lot more than it was a few years ago, but so is the Xactimate rate. Here in Atlanta, we get over $60 an hour from Xactimate for the labor hourly rate for a technician. So I just told you that in Atlanta, if we've got a good technician, we're paying them $25 an hour, it's probably costing us about $37.50 for that person, and we're getting $60. Why are we getting that additional money? Well, in Xactimate, they not only pay you for the labor, but they pay you the burden, and they pay you an additional fee for what they call labor overhead. If you don't believe me, there are ways you can look this up in Xactimate. In the line item for the rate, there's a little information box. In that information box, it gives the full breakdown. It gives you the hourly wage, it gives you the burden, and then it gives you the additional amount for what's called labor overhead. And that's additional 40% that Xactimate gives you for all of your other internal indirect costs for having that employee. Things like, well, I have to give the employee a paycheck, so I have to do his payroll every week. They give you amount of money to handle the internal costs for doing that. So that's basically an overhead of the company. When we talk about O&P, that's an area where there is overhead built into a line item. Now, is it fully enough to operate your company? No, but it's 40%. If you think that you're making 80% or more on your equipment, which you are, trust me, you are, and you're making at least 40% on your labor, and you balance just those two things out, you're over 60%. And I'm going to tell you where you're going to make even more money than 60%. The third place that Xactimate factors in how much money we make for a line item is what they call rate of production. On all of the unit cost line items, the things like removing drywall and doing your demo and doing your cleaning, on all of those unit cost line items, there's what they call a rate of production. Within the drywall line item, it actually tells you how fast Xactimate assumes your guys are going to work. For drywall, for instance, it assumes your guys should be able to remove 120 square feet of drywall in 1 hour. That includes taking it off the walls and putting it into a garbage bag and taking the screws or nails out of the wall and doing a light sweep up of the area. That's what that involves. 120 square feet. So what's 120 square feet of drywall? Well, on an 8-foot wall, 8-foot high wall, we're talking about, let's just call it a 15-foot length wall, right? 8 times 15 is 120. So if you have to take a 15-foot wall, 8 feet high, if you have to take that down, Xactimate allows one person to be able to do that in 1 hour. Let's face it, the way we make money is if our guys can work faster than that. If we can get one guy to take down a 15-foot wall fully demoed and cleaned in 40 or 45 minutes or 30 minutes, we make more money because they're paying us as if it's taking the guy that long. So in an entire job, if we're able to say, well, I'm putting my guys on this job and it's supposed to take 60 hours, I'm getting paid 60 hours of labor to do this work, and my guys get it done in 40, I just made 20 free hours of pay from Xactimate. You're telling me you can't make money doing that? If you understand the program and you train your teams properly and you build properly, you can make money on this. And here in Atlanta, I'm going to tell you, for each one of these myths we explode, I'm going to tell you the reality of what we do here in Atlanta. And I'm not doing this as a way to brag. I'm doing this to let you know it can be done, and it can easily be done the way I'm saying. and how the way that you're reading on the internet is really killing you. We do not change the rates or the line items in our invoices. We get paid faster by doing it that way. You understand, every time you change the rates, it's going to take the adjuster much longer to get through your review. It just is. They don't like that. Then they want to see how much you changed, how much they think you're ripping them off, and then they're going to have much more issue or problem cutting a check. Here in Atlanta, we submit over 100 mitigation invoices every month, and we make a gross profit of more than 80% on the vast majority of our invoices. Our target in our company is 83% gross profit, which means after commissions and after everything else it's costing us, fuel and filters and labor and everything else that we're going to do on a job, plastic, no matter what it is, dumpsters, we don't want to exceed 17% cost. And using Xactimate, not changing the billing, we are able to operate at a higher than 80% on the vast majority of our jobs. By not changing anything, our time for collections is about half of your time or other companies' time. The industry standard is about 65 to 70 days, and we collect the vast majority of our insurance billed invoices in less than 40 days. Now, yes, if it's a self-pay, we operate like most companies. We get a down payment, and then we get the final payment as soon as we're done and we pull the equipment. But I'm talking about the jobs where we say, all right, we're going to submit it through insurance, and we're going to help you collect, and we're going to talk about that as another one of these myths. But we will do that, and then we will collect our money from the insurance company in about 35 to 40 days. So we're getting our money really, really quickly. So you tell me, if we're making margins on gross margins of more than 80%, and we're not changing anything in Xactimate, and we're getting paid within 35 to 40 days, can you make money doing it our way? Myth number 2, we never talk to the insurance company. Again, this is a generalized concept, but you see this literally every week on all those pages that you and I know we're talking about. You'll see things like this. Our contract is with the insured. We bill them and they owe us the money. We're not working for the insurance company. We're not a party to anything, okay? I'm going to refute this myth. I do agree with you that your contract is with the insured, and legally they're the one that owes you the money. In reality, there are a lot of things that go on in your business that we're going to talk about now. And we're going to have to factor it into whether or not you decide to talk to the insurance company. And then if you do, take my advice to do that as a service to your client, how you have to go about doing that, because you have to build your entire business practice around this. First question I'm going to ask you, who has the money? If you're going to tell me your customer owes you the money, that's all well and good. But I'm telling you, here in Atlanta, the vast majority of our clients would not be able to afford to pay us our invoice if we did not assist them in getting the money from the insurance company to pay us. Our average invoice is in excess of $11,000 for a normal residential water damage insurance invoice. Yes, I said that. Part of what I didn't talk about before, when we're talking about hanging out and doing Xactimate, is that we're very, very aggressive in how we invoice. We use Xactimate to our advantage. We put every line item on there for every direct cost. So we bill $11,000. Just like all of you, there are, certain sections of town where we know the clients probably would be able to pay that. But there are many, many of our clients who, just like you and me, we might be struggling from day to day or week to week to pay our bills. And if we all of a sudden had an $11,000 shock to our system, we couldn't come up with that money in 3 or 4 days to be able to pay that bill. So really, when you ask yourself the question, who has the money? It's really their insurance company. So what is the goal? The goal is to get the money from the hands of the people who have it into our hands. If the insurance company has the money, we're going to do everything in our power to help our clients get that money out of their hands. How do we do that? Well, we submit our insurance invoices to our clients because that's legally who's obligated to pay the bill. But we also will copy their adjuster. We will make sure the adjuster gets our invoice as soon as possible. Then we're going to coach up our client. And a lot of this is talked about online, and it's, again, talked about incorrectly, but it's onboarding your client. When you first sign them up, you have to teach them about this process of collections, and you have to teach them how the insurance companies are going to react, because you need their support. The first level of support is, as soon as you submit that invoice to the insurance company with, being CC'd on the customer's invoice, you need to make sure that the insurance company is going to confirm they got it, because now that's going to start the clock, quote unquote, for them to be able to respond to you and pay you. So you want your homeowner, your client, to just call his carrier and say, hey, I just want to make sure you got that email from my restoration company. When the client does that, they're helping you in the process. Now, we have a team of people, as I'm going to explain later, that are going to do the follow-ups here. But we make sure that we do really, really aggressive attacks on the carrier to make sure that they are going to be able to move a check out of their hands into our hands or the client's hands as soon as possible. We're going to make sure that we do whatever we can to speed that process up. We're going to be helpful. We're going to be friendly. We're not going to take the screw you approach that you read on the internet. We're not going to take the approach that you're the idiot, I'm the expert, because you know what? They have a job to do. And like I said, I don't care if they've only been in the business 8 months and they don't know what they're doing. Yes, that's a hurdle we have to overcome. But keep referring back to question number one here. Who has the money? If the idiot has the money and you call him an idiot, what's your chances of getting the money out of him? That's just common sense, guys. Number two, who is your lead source? This never gets talked about in these blog posts about all these geniuses who, I never talk to insurance and I have a very successful company and I get my money from the homeowners. You know what the first sentence they always talk about is? The homeowner owes you the money. If they can't pay you, you lien them. Okay, great. I don't know about you guys, but the vast majority of business that's not program business gets generated from business to business referrals. Plumbers and agents refer business to most restoration companies who do water damage. That's the fact. That's the reality. Here in Atlanta, over 80% of the business we do comes from plumbers and agents. Over 80%. So as much as we know that the client is our client, our relationship with the lead source in many ways is much more important than the relationship with the client. So if I've got a plumber who's giving me 10 or 15 leads a month, the last thing I want to do is cause any trouble or any problems between my lead source and their client who they referred to me. Remember this, in business, most plumbers have long-term relationships with their clients. They might be doing work in that client's house every year or every couple of years, or they might be a family relationship that goes back a generation or so. It's very important to understand that their clients who they're referring to you, they're entrusting to you, are long-term relationships for them. They're vouching for you. If the first action that you do out of the box is say, screw you, pay me, or I'm going to lien your building, what do you think the first thing that homeowner is going to do? They're going to go back and they're going to scream and yell at the plumber. And they're going to want to know why that plumber referred such an untrustworthy company who's not even willing to work with them. That is the main issue. That affects your marketing. It affects your sales. It affects your production. It affects every part of your business. To me, that's the lazy way out. So if you just want to say, screw the homeowner, we're going to lien the house, you're literally jeopardizing everything in your company for that one job. So you have to take a real hard look every single time. I told you we do over 100 invoices a month here in Atlanta. Out of the 1,500 jobs that we will do every year, there are less than 15 that we will even consider putting a lien on the house on. And when those decisions occur, they usually occur because we have knowledge that the adjuster or the insurance company has released payment to the homeowner, and that homeowner has now taken action to keep from paying us. That is when we will then take some legal action. And before we even do that, we'll make sure we go back to the lead source and let them know exactly what we're doing so that we don't jeopardize that relationship either. Hope you understand all these different nuances to building your business. Building and executing your business is so much bigger and so much more involved than simply asking a question on a Facebook page and getting an answer from somebody who doesn't even do this for a living. Third question you have to ask, how much effort are you putting into collections? And the reason I'm asking you this is because most people want to, pardon my French, but bitch and complain about the process of collecting the money. And all they want to do is they want to blame the homeowner, or even worse, they want to blame the insurance company. But how much effort are you actually putting in to collections? In every case of every company that Dick and I have ever worked with, when I go in and I analyze the processes and I analyze the administrative system, the weakest part of every single company is the invoicing and collections. There is no effort put into that. In most cases, the person who's running the production out in the field is in charge of invoicing and collections, or the person involved with collections is probably the bookkeeper, because they're the ones who quote unquote created the invoice. Let me point out the two obvious flaws in that. If the production person is in charge with invoicing and collections, their main focus is always going to be out of the office, out in the field. And if you're a company that's doing even 4 jobs a week, that means you've always got something going on out in the field. That means the person who's involved with collections is always doing that as a second or third task, because they're involved with sales, they're involved with production, they're involved with solving problems, they're involved with answering questions. They're never even making a phone call to the adjuster. So they're not focused on it. The other part of it is, if you have your bookkeeper trying to do collections, how can they possibly talk to an adjuster about the nuances of your invoice? Why did you bill for 6 days of drying? Why did you add in this particular line item? Why did you feel like it was a Cat 2? Your bookkeeper shouldn't know that information unless you're a really tiny company and it happens to be that your spouse or your child is a bookkeeper and they've grown up in the industry. But let's just face it, if you're running a normal business, your bookkeeper doesn't know anything about technical questions that an adjuster might ask you. So put information out there that can speed up your process. Put effort into collections. So I'm going to explain how we do it here. We assist our clients in communicating with their carriers, all right? So we talk with the adjuster, not to the adjuster. We make sure all our information that we go back and forth with, the homeowner is part of that process. We share all of our information and documentation up front. This whole notion, when I got in the industry 15 years ago, of, oh, you know what, if the insurance company wants it, they could pay me for it. If they want pictures, they're going to pay me. I'm going to charge them $8 a picture. You're like, all that stuff is so narrow-minded. You want to get the money, you have to provide a service. You owe it to your client to be as upfront and transparent as possible. We have a very large staff devoted solely to invoicing and collecting money. I told you most companies do it with either somebody in production or a bookkeeper. We've got 5 people who all they do here in Atlanta is invoice and collect the money just for mitigation. We have an entirely separate group of people who do the invoicing and collections for all of our other services, which I'm going to talk about next. So we have 5 people dedicated and devoted to just handling this one part of our business. They don't even know about any of our jobs until the COC gets signed. That's when they start to get involved with the project. That's how deliberate we are. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars specifically and only on invoicing and collections. But at the end of the day, we know that our client's money is sitting at that insurance company. So we accept that as a fact. We don't try to change the rules of the game. These are the rules of the game. We just play the game better. We follow the rules better than everybody else. So we make it our mission to get that money in our hands. So if you did what we did and you invested into your invoicing and collections and you billed higher and you collected faster, could you make money? The third myth that I think is really, really hurting you comes from people who are out there basically saying you should only do mitigation. The jack of all trades, master of none mentality. No one makes money doing full service, right? You'll read that. Or restoration companies should stick to only what they do best. Those are things you're going to hear all the time. You see it, you read it. I'm here to kill that myth. And here's how we're going to kill that myth. The logic behind this myth started from the fact that the most profitable and quickest part of any job you're going to do is the emergency services. So that part is true. Every time you do other services, the margins are going to be slightly less, or in the case of reconstruction services, a lot less. Like I said to you, we operate in excess of 80% gross margins. Nobody in the country is doing repairs at 80% gross margins. So I completely understand that mindset. But I'm going to talk to you in a way that nobody else talks on the internet. And I'm going to explain to you why it makes sense. You have to truly consider growing your business and how we're going to do that. Number one way, what is your cost of acquisition? Funny phrase, right? Cost of acquisition. But cost of acquisition is something that phone companies talk about, cable companies talk about, computer companies talk about, insurance companies talk about when they're trying to grow their own businesses. I made mention before, I spent 25 years on Wall Street. So I do have a little special knowledge in what happens with growing a business, not just a restoration business. And cost of acquisition is one of the most important factors in any industry. You have to know what it costs you to get a new job, right? You're going to wine and dine a plumber to give you work. How much money are you going to give that plumber in wining and dining him? And then how much of a referral fee you're going to give them in order to generate work? Let's just say you take a plumber out to a bunch of lunches and you take him out for drinks and you give him tickets to a game, and then you get a job and then you bill $5,000, but the plumber fee is $800 in your area. So the $800 plus that wining and dining, you might be all in for $1,250. That means your cost of acquisition for that first job is 25% of your revenue. That's a ridiculously high cost of acquisition. So I want you to know what it costs you to bring in the work. How do we figure that out? Well, what's your marketing cost? What are you paying your marketer? What kind of allowance are you giving them? What's the cost of their vehicle? What's the cost of all the events you're having? If you're doing plumber breakfast, if you're doing meet and greets, if you're actually taking people out to breakfasts and lunches, if you have sports tickets, if you have incentives, if you belong to a country club, what are all those costs for you? So those are marketing costs. And then what are your referral costs? If you are paying a referral fee to either a plumber or another referral source, you have to add all those together and you have to get that number, and then you have to divide that into the work that effort generated. So if you're marketing for your entire company. Don't forget to include things like your SEO fees or your pay-per-click fees, all of your internet costs, any kind of website costs, anything that would be considered a marketing or advertising cost. Then you can put that into your gross receipts. That would be your cost of acquisition. So you need to know what that is. Number two, how many bites at the apple can you get? This directly relates to cost of acquisition. If you're a company that only does mitigation, you're going to generate that phone call. So that phone call is going to be just for water damage, and you're going to do the mitigation. But let's just imagine if you got that phone call and you went into the house and the house was built in the 50s, and you know that there's asbestos in that house and you have to do demo of the walls. So you now have to refer that out to a restoration remediation company that does asbestos. Let's just say the flooring has to come up. So now you have to get the furniture out of that house. Now you have to refer that out to a pack out company. And then obviously the homeowner is going to want to do repairs for the flooring and the walls. So they're going to need a reconstruction company. If you were a true full service company that was able to offer all of those services, how many bites at that apple would you get? And bites at the apple, I mean, the apple is that first lead that came into you. Instead of one bite, you'd have 4 bites at that apple. Let's go back and look at number one now. The cost of acquisition just changed drastically, because even if it cost you $1,250 to get that $5,000 mitigation job in, you are able, if you're a full service company now, that $5,000 mitigation job also generated a $7,000 asbestos abatement job. It generated a $5,000 pack out, and it generated a $15,000 repair. So now you're in the $30,000 plus revenue side. So instead of being 25% cost of acquisition, your cost of acquisition now just went from 25% to about 3%. Yes, it cost you $1,000 to generate $30,000 plus of revenue. So you went from 25% cost of acquisition to 3% cost of acquisition. Yes, the margins are lower, but you are using your marketing to generate more revenue. The key, obviously, is to be able to be a jack of all trades and a master of most. You have to be able to do those other services well. So you need to invest in a good process and good people in those other divisions. But look at the difference in generating that lead, getting that phone to ring, and what you can do from that. Finally, in your marketplace, what does being a full service company do to your competitive advantage? I know for a fact, and it's supported not just anecdotally, but it's supported by the facts, both here in Atlanta and other places that Dick and I have worked with our CREST members. Full service companies have a better chance of getting work from plumbers than mitigation only companies. Why is that? Well, if a plumber wants to trust you to put the job in your hands, they want to trust you. If you then have to go find another company to do the abatement and another company to do the packouts and another company to do repairs, or if you're just leaving it up to the customer to find them themselves, that plumber has not given the homeowner the same value as if they can say, hey, I'm going to refer you to XYZ Restoration, and these guys will do it all for you no matter what happens. That's a much better referral for the plumber, and therefore you have a competitive advantage over somebody else in your marketplace who might even pay a higher bonus or referral. The other thing is, remember, if you're bringing in $5,000 and you're paying $800, that kind of hurts. But if you're bringing in $30,000 and you're paying $800, you can be more competitive. You can actually pay a more competitive rate, so you can compete with these crazies in your industry who are paying those high rates. Chances are those guys are full service companies too. We know here in Atlanta, we couldn't be competitive in the plumbing market if it wasn't for the fact that we are a full service company. Again, I'm going to tell you here, over the last 10 years, we have added additional services. We now do packouts in-house. We do environmental services, including mold, asbestos, and lead, and we do full reconstruction services. By doing that, we have lowered our acquisition costs and allowed us to remain competitive in the plumber marketing game. We've also been able to increase our market share. We've been able to grow our plumber referral and our market share in a very, very competitive market. Finally, we've actually increased our net profit percentage. Obviously, you're going to increase the dollars, but the percentage also matters because you want to be in that area where you're making above 10% net profit. I don't know if you've heard me on other podcasts before, but the rule of thumb is if you're a company that makes between 0 and 5% net profit, you're a company that's struggling to stay afloat, and you're really only a couple of months from being out of business. If you're a company that makes between 5 and 10% net profit at the end of the year, you're a stable company, but you really can't grow because you don't have enough money to invest. And then if you're in that sweet spot of very few companies, less than 10% of all the restoration companies in America make a higher than 10% net profit. And if you're in that area, you can do growth. Well, over the last 10 years, we struggled at first, but in the last 5 or 6 years, we've exceeded 15% net profit, which means we've been able to grow our market share in a very competitive market by adding those other services. It's been a huge help to us, and it has been the difference maker. My last piece of advice to you guys, stop reading and start working. Everything I just described about changing the way you think about Xactimate, changing the way you think about insurance companies, and changing the way you think about being a jack of all trades, that requires hard work. That's not as simple as just merely saying, all right, I'm not going to do what they say. You have to put in the hard work. But I hope anecdotally through my own personal story, but through some logic that we talked about, I've been able to show you and tell you exactly how to do the work. So stop reading and start working. On behalf of Dick Wagner and myself, I really want to thank you for joining us today. I know that you guys are very busy, and I know that I just told you I don't want you spending a lot of time on the internet. So it really does mean a lot to us when you take time out of your busy schedule each week to listen to the information we give you. We hope that what we're giving you is the best possible information. And these are ways that if you spend an hour with us, that you can then have exponential growth in your company, and you can have a way that you can feel like not only are we helping you, but we're giving you ways that you can grow and look with a positive impact on your business. So on behalf of Dick and myself and everybody at the CREST Network, thank you so much. And I want to welcome you back the next time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.